Some of these stories involve ghosts. Others involve guests who should have never been allowed inside. I had just finished a 5-day brutal work event. I slept maybe 10 hours total. Right after it ended, I traveled out of the country and checked into a small rundown motel. The place was damp. The carpet felt wet. Even the blankets were clammy. Normally, that would have bothered me. But I was beyond exhausted, so I didn't care. I fell asleep almost instantly. It was around 8 p.m. A few hours later, sometime around 11, the phone in my room rang. It was the motel front desk. They said they'd received a noise complaint from my room. I told them that couldn't be right and I'd been asleep. They paused, then asked if there was anyone else in the room with me. I said no, I was alone. They asked again, "Were you sure that there was no one else there? Was anyone making noise?" I told them again no, just me. The call ended, and I fell right back asleep. The next morning, it finally hit me how strange that call was. I hadn't heard any noise at all, not from my room, the neighboring rooms. And the way they kept asking if I was alone didn't sit right. When I mentioned the call at the front desk later, they looked confused. They told me no one had called my room. That's when it really set in. Someone had been dialing the motel phones directly. Someone who wanted to know if I was alone. I have never been so grateful for that extra chain lock on the door. This happened to my wife and me about 20 years ago during our honeymoon. We had originally planned something big, but money was tight, so we booked a short trip to Niagara Falls instead. We stayed at a hotel on the American side close to the falls. The day itself was a mess. Our flight was overbooked, we got bumped, and by the time we landed in Buffalo, picked up the rental car, and drove to the hotel, it was after midnight. We were completely exhausted. The room was clearly designed for honeymooners. Dim lighting, oversized bed, and a hot tub awkwardly sitting in the middle of the room. We ignored most of it and dropped our bags. My wife laid down on the bed facing away from the room. I went to the bathroom to wash up and set out our toiletries. While I was in there, I heard her talking. I stepped out and asked her who she was talking to. She sat straight up and asked if I'd just come over and sat on the bed with her. I told her no, I hadn't left the bathroom. She insisted she had felt someone walk over and sit on the bed next to her. She didn't imagine it. She swears she felt it. We chalked it up to exhaustion and went to sleep. A few hours later, she shook me awake. This time, she was genuinely scared. She whispered that someone was in the room. She said she heard footsteps coming from the bathroom, moving towards her side of the bed. I turned on the lamp and checked everywhere. The bathroom was empty. The door was locked. No one was in there. The next night, it happened again. We both woke up to the sound of heavy footsteps, pacing around the room. We sat up in the dark, listening. I finally called out, asking if anyone was there. Almost immediately, we felt the mattress sink, like someone had sat at the foot of the bed. I jumped up and turned on the light. The room was empty, and yet again, the door was locked, including the interior latch. We left the TV on for noise and tried to fall back asleep again. Not long after, we heard movement in the bathroom. I grabbed an umbrella for self-defense and checked again. Nothing. The next morning, I mentioned noise complaints to the front desk. When I gave them our room number, they told me there hadn't been anyone staying in the rooms next to us. Our room was also a corner at the end of a hallway. That night, it happened one last time. We heard footsteps moving slowly in circles near my side of the bed. As I whispered to my wife that it couldn't be coming from anywhere else, the mattress dipped in again, right between us, as if someone laid down right there. After 3 nights of this now, my wife spoke out loud, asking for it to leave us alone. And I'm shocked it worked. That night, we slept fine. The next day, we asked to change rooms. The staff didn't question us as if they knew something. They moved us immediately. We slept peacefully after that. This happened a few weeks ago in a hostel in London. I was traveling with 2 friends, both male, and we were staying in a mixed 9-bed dorm. The room had 3 sets of triple-tier bunk beds. I was on the bottom bunk on the right set. One of my friends was directly above me, and the other was on the bottom bunk of the middle set. We got back around 2 a.m. and quietly went to bed. A few minutes later, while lying on my side facing the wall, I heard rustling behind me. I assumed someone was going through their bag and ignored it. Then I felt a hand on my hip over the covers. I turned around and saw a random guy standing there, pulling at my blanket, telling me to move over. At first, I thought he was drunk and confused about which bed was his. I told him to go find his own bed. He shuffled away to the bottom of the bunk on the left side of the room. A minute later, he came back. Again, I told him to leave. He shuffled away again. This happened several more times. Each time, I got louder and less polite, eventually telling him to F off. By this point, I was shaking. I messaged my friend on the top bunk, telling him I didn't think I was going to sleep. He replied casually, not thinking something was seriously wrong and maybe it was just someone snoring. That's when I realized both of my friends were wearing earplugs. They had heard me speaking, but each thought I was talking to the other. I explained what was happening, and he immediately started watching the room. The guy went into the ensuite bathroom. I noticed the light was on and the door was wide open, but I refused to look. My friend later told me the guy was walking around with his pants down, clearly trying to get attention. Eventually, the guy went back to his bed. We thought it was over. It wasn't. My friend suddenly shined his phone flashlight towards the floor and yelled at the guy to get away from me. Apparently, the man was crawling across the floor towards my bed. That's when he snapped. He climbed the bunk ladder toward my friend like an animal, trying to grab his phone. They wrestled while my friend kept kicking him in the neck, trying to keep him away. The guy barely reacted, and he kept coming back. I used that moment to run for security. When they arrived, the man was still clinging to the bunk bed. They called for the police, and he was dragged out and taken away in a riot van, banned from the building. While waiting outside, he repeatedly headbutted a brick wall. It definitely wasn't alcohol. Whatever he was on allowed him to take a kick to the neck and act like it was nothing. I think it goes without saying, I had a terrifying sleepless night after. My daughter was traveling around the country for school competitions. The hotel we were staying at was fairly new, only a few years old. As soon as we walked into the room, my daughter looked around, went into the bathroom, and came out. She said, "I don't like this room." The weird part is that was all she said. No explanation or reasoning. I brushed it off. The room looked fine. Clean, modern, nothing unusual. I assumed she was just being a teenager. We went out to eat and came back later that night to sleep. Again, she kept saying how much she didn't like the room. She used the bathroom with the door open and told me not to walk over there. Again, I didn't think much of it. I stayed up watching TV while she passed out pretty fast. Eventually, I turned the TV off and laid there in the dark. That's when I heard the sheets move. It was loud and crisp, like a sharp whooshing sound. I assumed it was the sound of my daughter pulling the tightly tucked sheets loose. Then it happened again, louder. I was lying on my side, facing her bed, when I heard the sound rise straight up between us. I turned my head and saw what looked like a human shape standing between the beds, completely covered in white, like sheets pulled over a person. My first thought is, what's my daughter doing? Then I realized it couldn't be her. It was almost touching the ceiling, like there was nothing underneath it. No feet, no body. Suddenly, the shape collapsed straight down into the floor. The white fabric rippled as it vanished. I shot upright, shaking, and turned on the light. My daughter was still fast asleep in her bed. I turned the TV back on and left it on all night. I didn't move, and I barely breathed, thinking maybe it was a nightmare. Sometime later, I felt the corner of my bed sink, like someone sitting down. I didn't look. I stayed frozen until the feeling faded. The next morning, I felt someone lean over me. Then, I felt a kiss on my cheek. I opened my eyes and there was nothing there. At that point, I couldn't wait to leave. When I woke up my daughter, she said she was glad we were going. While eating her breakfast, she told me that she barely slept because I kept sitting on her bed, and then I kissed her cheek that morning. I hadn't touched her or left my own bed. When I told her what I saw, she immediately said, "I told you, I didn't like that room." She explained that when she first went into the bathroom, it felt like someone died in there. It felt dark, and that's why she refused to close the door. Before leaving, I asked the front desk if the hotel was haunted. The clerk asked for our room number. When I told her, she froze, walked back into the back room, and didn't come back out for a while. After waiting several minutes, nothing. We were technically done checking out, and she took so long, we left. I did see her briefly peek out the back and then disappear again. I didn't feel anything when we arrived in that room. No warning, no dread. But whatever was there made sure it was known. I never blamed people for not believing in ghosts. Honestly, before this job, I wasn't sure what I believed either. I was 19, and I started working nights as a hotel auditor at a 4-star hotel in my hometown. I won't name it, not because I'm scared of backlash, but because the hotel itself doesn't want anyone talking about what happens there after dark. If I had known that going in, I don't think I ever would have applied, especially not for the night shift. During onboarding, I signed a non-disclosure agreement. It said I wasn't allowed to talk about anything unusual I experienced while working there, especially to the media. At the time, I assumed it was standard paperwork and didn't question it. My first night was a training shift. The hotel was small enough that the night auditor also doubled as security. So 2 or 3 times a night, we were required to walk the entire building. Every hallway had a large floor-length mirror at each end. Before we started the rounds, my trainer gave me one piece of advice that stuck with me. "Don't look into the mirrors while you walk," she said. "And if you see something, don't scream." She said it casually, like it was a joke, so I laughed it off. By my 3rd night, I wasn't laughing. I was sitting at the front desk with my trainer. From where we were, we could see straight through the glass doors to the parking lot, which was brightly lit. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. Something small stepped into view. It looked like a child, about the right height, wearing a red cloak. It walked past the doors and then stopped. Slowly, it turned its head and looked straight inside. I can't properly describe its face. All I know is that it wasn't the face of a living child. I froze and couldn't form any words. I turned to my trainer, and there she was staring at the door, mouth open, completely pale. After a long moment that felt like forever, she whispered, "Did you see that?" We didn't speak much after that. The rest of the shift felt heavy and wrong. When the morning manager arrived, my trainer quit on the spot. She kept repeating, "I've seen enough, I've seen enough, I've seen enough." The next night, the manager herself had to finish my training. We got along well, and I eventually asked why my trainer left so suddenly. I mean, I think I knew after the previous night, but I wanted to hear it from her. The manager hesitated, then admitted the truth. Night auditors never stayed long. She explained why. The hotel hadn't always been a hotel. It started as a mill in the mid-1800s and operated until after World War II. In the 1940s, a little girl fell down an elevator shaft. Her grandfather and the family dog tried to save her. All three died. The mill shut down soon after. When it reopened decades later as a hotel, activity started. Guests and staff reported seeing a child, hearing laughter late at night, and occasional barking sounds from 2 rooms on the top floor, both located on each side of the original elevator shaft. The grandfather wasn't really seen anymore, and as of now, same with the dog. But that little girl was still very active. The owners refused to acknowledge it publicly. They didn't want a haunted reputation. They wanted luxury, not ghost hunters. 3 months after this conversation, the very same manager quit too. She told me someone had been hearing a child laughing while working late, even when the hotel was nearly empty and no families had checked in. Personally, I lasted 6 months. That was more than enough. Out of all stories I've shared in this video, this next one is probably the most heinous one I've read. After 2 years of working night audit, I've learned that the most disturbing part of this job isn't the strange noises or the isolation at 3 a.m. It's not the dead. It's what's living, the guests that walk through those doors each day. I have dealt with armed, intoxicated men, severe mental breakdowns, and people wandering the halls talking to themselves for hours. But this incident stands out because nothing about it made sense. A few hours into my shift, a man started coming down from his room and wandering the lobby as well as the breakfast area. He wasn't looking for anything. He would sit at a table and then stand up and switch chairs every few minutes. He talked quietly to himself the entire time. Whenever I asked if he needed help, he would flinch and mumble he didn't. Eventually, he went back to his room. A few hours later, he returned to the desk. He told me he had turned on the heater and it made him short of breath. He asked me to call an ambulance. I was very confused but concerned, so I did. About a moment later, the fire alarm went off. Firefighters arrived and went up to his room. While they were there, they repeatedly asked me if anyone stayed with him. I told them the entire time he was alone. After everything settled and the building was cleared, I went to check the room. He had completely rearranged the furniture. The television had been moved into the bathroom. In the center of the room, he had placed the trash can and set it on fire. But that wasn't the part that stayed with me. Scattered around the room were small children's clothing. He checked in alone.